James drove into the wilderness when a hungry wolf pack surrounded him. To survive, he had to become one of them, expand their territory, and nurse the young. How far will you take the all-new RAV4 Hybrid? Toyota, let's go places.
Is found in the desert. The Tar Heels have won their 6th national title. The devastation of last year turns to elation in 2017. 71-65, North Carolina, national champions.
At the end, when you're watching your kids jump around and the excitement, the thrill they have, there's no better feeling in the world as a coach. Thank you.
Give it your all, fight for your team, and just go out there and compete for your brothers. They're like family to me, and that's all I did. And I was able to put my pain aside and just think about them first.
Welcome to SI Now. It's Tuesday, April 4th, and I'm Madeline Burke in for Maggie Gray. The ceiling is the roof. UNC gets its one shining moment with a 71-65 win over Gonzaga in the national championship game Monday night. And joining me this morning to talk about the madness is SI senior writer Pete Thamel. Pete, thanks for getting up early to talk hoops with us.
Happy to be here.
All right, well, a storyline of this season has been the redemption tour for the Tar Heels. But how amazing is it that a team that lost a title on a heartbreaking buzzer beater actually did what it hoped to do, got back there and won it this year?
It's hard to quantify how, when you get that close to something and then you get it ripped away to you, how that changes you and affects you. And I think that was the intangible that drove North Carolina all this year. It's just the power of being that close and having heartbreak that significant.
Now, despite how close this game was, Roy Williams said it himself, neither team played particularly well in this game. That last few minutes, though, was what broke this one open. But in your opinion, what was the defining factor?
I think that it was such a slog of a game that I really think Carolina's size and experience and just being able to manage how little flow there was all game. I mean, obviously a lot of guys made key shots, and there's obviously the key sequence at the end with the Kennedy Meeks block and then the lockout, the run out for the Justin Jackson dunk. But I really think the age, experience, and a stick-to-itiveness partially forged by having endured last season is really what defined this game for Carolina.
Now, Roy Williams has now won 3 championships for his alma mater, which makes him our adrenaline performance presented by Toyota. Let's go places. What does number 3 mean for Williams as his standing in the coaching circle?
Oh boy, I mean, I think it puts him in the highest of high and elitist of elite categories. He got a few questions last night about passing Dean Smith, his mentor, which is hard to believe. But Roy Williams is now ahead of the great legendary Dean Smith in national titles, and he's headed for the like a Mount Rushmore-ish role in college basketball history.
Yeah, and he was very humble about that as well, saying, I can't believe, and nor do I think I should be mentioned in the same sentence as Dean Smith, but clearly Roy has earned it. Now, a tradition for many championship teams is a White House visit. Now, you've got a piece on SI.com that talks about Roy Williams' stance on this. He says he's non-committal. Can you expand on that?
Well, at the ACC tournament in Brooklyn nearly a month ago, Roy Williams took a pretty blatant jab at President Trump. He's also known to have a pretty good bromance with President Obama, Reggie Love, who played football at Duke, or I think maybe basketball. Reggie Love was Obama's top aide for years. He joked earlier this year publicly, it sickens him how much Obama loves Roy Williams. So and Obama spoke to the UNC team in October during practice, before the season started. So I asked the Trump question to a bunch of people all week, and there was a lot of, we'd be honored to go, and, we want to win and go. And I had asked Roy on Friday about it, and he said he didn't want to jinx himself, So he said, ask me Monday night. When I asked him, he kind of paused and gave a non-answer. And so you can say a lot by not saying anything, and that's my read on what happened here.
Yeah, it's kind of what wasn't said that really stands out there. Thanks so much for joining us, Pete, early in the morning out there in Phoenix after a late-night championship. But with the championship in the books, let's recap the college basketball season that led us here. Now, college basketball season may be over, but baseball is in full swing. And joining me today is a man who's played a game or two, more like 19 years worth in the majors, all with the Braves organization, Chipper Jones. And Chipper, you wrote a book that comes out today talking about all this and more called Ball Player. We've got that book right here. You're one of the greatest switch hitters to ever play the game. I loved reading about the way that your dad was, an influence on developing your swing and kind of being a mentor throughout your career. Can you talk about that relationship?
Well, I mean, Dad was my best friend,
Yeah.
when I was growing up. So us going down to the ballpark and working on swings from both sides of the plate was almost a daily occurrence. It was something that he didn't have to drag me out for, but most of the time I had to drag him out. Yeah. But, he was such a big influence on me as a best friend of mine to this day. And my mother and father were both very, very intricate parts of my upbringing and continue to be to this day.
And not only did he, kind of guide you, but he also knew when to step aside and say, no, you got to take guidance from this person. Now we're in a time when we see some fathers that are stepping more involved in athletes' lives. Yeah. I mean, how valuable was it that he knew where his limitations were?
Well, I think it was big to get different views from different people. He never coached me officially. Behind the scenes he would coach me, but was never a coach on one of my teams, allowed other people to be able to do that. I think it was big for my development to be able to take a 5% from this guy and 5% from this guy and just kind of be a little bit of a chameleon, as you would say, in the baseball world.
Now, you and your dad both idolized Mickey Mantle, another great switch hitter. And, you wrote about the first time you met him. And I love that story, but how much did that influence you in, how you carried yourself throughout your career?
Well, I learned a lot from it. I found myself actually practicing in the mirror how I was going to meet Mickey Mantle because, I mean, you could have put a picture of him up in our church and I would have thought he was God. That's how revered he was in our family. So, yeah, I got a chance to do a card show with him in 1992 and found myself in the mirror the night before, hi, Mr. Mantle, how are you doing? And, of course, when the time came, I absolutely froze.
Right.
Didn't say a word. He probably thought I was the biggest geek ever, but got a chance to sit there and watch what grown men thought about Mickey Mantle. I mean, to see people walk up, tears in their eyes, fawning over this man. And he told me a funny story that day. He said, I have a recurring dream. I asked him, if he ever got tired of signing autographs, and he said, I have a recurring dream. He goes, I'm standing at the pearly gates, and I got this worried look on my face, and God walks up and looks at me, and he says, Mickey, I'm going to let you in, but can you sign these dozen baseballs first? So that kind of got me, ready for what fame and playing on TBS every night was going to do.
Sure.
Once I got to the big league.
Sure, and now I'm sure you've experienced plenty of that from his seat as well.
Not quite as much. It's a little different here in New York than it is in Atlanta, but everything is relative, I guess.
So now in the book, you also talk about your first interaction with Scott Boras. Mm-hmm. He's a big-time agent in Major League Baseball, but you actually walked out of a meeting with him.
Well, look, you're not gonna mesh with everybody. You're not gonna get along with everybody. You're not gonna have the same views as everybody. And at the high school level, I was going to a boarding school, and I was having to go through it a lot on my own. I was frustrated with the whole process and had a lot of meetings with a lot of other agents, and I knew right away that, hey, Scott and I just weren't going to mesh together, so I wasn't going to waste any more time, and I walked out. But, you know, no hard feelings. Scott has gone on to do great things in the game. It's just his methods and my beliefs didn't mesh.
And that's fair. That's fair. Now, there are a lot of things about baseball that make the sport unique. You know, the fraternity, the clubhouse, the unwritten rules, the brawls. But you played during the steroid era, which, you know, the purity of the game came into question at that time. You know, in the book, you talk about your first impressions of steroid use and admit that you seriously considered dabbling in that. You know, I mean, what stopped you?
I think the influence of my parents, the influence of my wife at that time. I didn't have any kids. I wanted kids, and certainly steroids is not the healthiest of things to do. Obviously, there were a lot of people at that time taking shortcuts, but I couldn't imagine looking in my parents' eyes if they knew that I had taken a shortcut or cheated. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what swayed me. And I knew that some of my contemporaries were doing it. But in the end, it gave me a lot more satisfaction walking away knowing that I did it right the whole time, and that, you know, I could play during the steroid era for, you know, the better part of 2 decades, and nobody ever questioned me, and I take great pride in that.
Yeah. Now, do you remember your first glimpse of it and thinking like this must be something a little bit different here?
Are you talking about steroids?
Yeah.
I never actually saw it.
Right,
you know? So,
right.
I guess I was a little naive. I know that there was a guy or two in our clubhouse that was doing it, but they did a good job of hiding it from me. So, you know, the temptation was seeing guys that you suspected were on it and the numbers that they were putting up. But ultimately, you got to really look in the mirror and say, what can I deal with? And I couldn't imagine dealing with the disappointment that my parents would have had with it.
Yeah.
So.
Now, Rob Manfred has said that he wants the MLB to join the dialogue on sports gambling. You know, that's been something that's come to light recently. What's your view on that?
Well, I only have Pete Rose to go by, so I mean, he's still not in the Hall of Fame for gambling. I just think there's going to be some kind of boundary stepping that's going to go on. You're going to have those gray areas that are going to. I think we just keep it out as much as we can. I know that the Raiders are now moving to Las Vegas, so that should be interesting. But you know, I'm not a big gambler myself, so it doesn't really affect me. But I think anytime you talk about bringing something in like that, you're always going to have people stepping over the line and doing things they shouldn't be doing. So why put up with the temptation?
Exactly. All right, well, this season is underway. The Bravos dropped one at the Mets on opening day, but they've got, you know, a lot of ball games left. Dansby Swanson got his first hit of the season yesterday. He's a guy in the game today, you know, who might be able to relate to you. This is Dansby's first full season. You were drafted #1 overall for the team that you watched growing up, and, you know, your first ballpark that you visited. It's kind of a similar situation for him. What kind of pressure do you think he's feeling right now, being the #1 pick in his hometown childhood team?
It's a little different for him. He came out of college, went to Vanderbilt, very smart kid, very bright kid. Has his head on straight. I came out of high school, young, small town kid, brash, cocky. This kid's got a lot of Derek Jeter qualities in him. His leadership skills are second to none. He's got a great job right now. He's hitting behind one of the best leadoff hitters in the game, and hitting in front of an MVP candidate. So he's going to be protected on both sides. I think for him, just keep your head down, be 1/9 of the equation that goes out there and tries to help the Atlanta Braves win a ball game. Everything else will turn out just fine. This kid has got a very, very bright future in front of him.
Now, you played most of your career for Hall of Fame manager Bobby Cox. How did Bobby influence your perception of the game overall?
I often say, and I say this in the book, Bobby is like that favorite grandfather. You got that one grandfather that's stern and by the book, and you've got that one other grandfather that kind of every time he shakes your hand, he slips you a 20. Bobby is that slip you a 20 kind of grandfather. It might not be a 20, but it could be a little nugget of information, a story, if you will. He had so many stories. You know, I'd get to the ballpark early, I sit down next to him on the bench, and I say, "Tell me something about Mickey Mantle. You know, tell me a Mickey story." And you know, he go in. And those were invaluable to me. Those were just the greatest of times because he's a great storyteller. He should write a book, in fact, because I'm sure with all his knowledge and all his experiences in the game, he could write one heck of a book. He was just one of my favorite people on the planet.
Do you have a favorite story?
None that I can tell on TV.
That's for another day. Maybe when Bobby comes out with a book of his own.
That's right. That's right.
Now, have you ever thought about coaching?
I have. I think that I'm at a point in my life now where I have 6 boys, ranging from 19 to 3 months.
Wow.
So quite a disparity there. I'm happy with my life now. I enjoy going home. I enjoy being a full-time father now that I'm done playing. I think that my kids and my family, they sacrifice so much because of the 23 years I spent in pro ball. You know what? It's time to be home. It's time to be the dad that I want to be. It's time to be the husband that I want to be. I enjoy playing golf with my buddies a couple times a week, playing golf with my dad a couple times a week, going out to dinner, things that you really, you know, you could sit here and say, well, that's not all that much, but those are things that I didn't get to do for quite some time. So I'm happy doing them. And I'm not ready to get back in uniform yet. And I don't know if I ever will, to be honest with you.
Fair. Now, I know hunting is a hobby of yours as well. Is it really true? Did you really go hunting the morning of Game 1 of the '95 World Series?
I did. I know that probably wasn't the smart. See, that's one of those things that you look back and you're just like, somebody should have smacked me upside the head. But yes, I did. I actually have a TV show on Sportsman's Channel that we spend quite a bit of time. But yes, the morning 1995 of the Game 1 of the World Series, I was in Macon, Georgia, deer hunting, and my dad couldn't believe I was doing it, but you know, I hunted till about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, beelined it up to Atlanta, slept on the training table for a couple hours, and then went out and tried to get a base hit against Oral Hershiser in Game 1 of the World Series.
I mean, do what you gotta do to get the nerves out, right?
Nervous energy. See, we got rid of the nervous energy, and I went 0 for 4 that night, but I hit the ball hard a couple times.
There you go. There you go. But at least you weren't nervous.
That's right. That's right.
Now, I mean, this is a great read, and you're very honest with your personal life, with your professional life. Do you have any regrets looking back?
I do. Obviously have some regrets. Everything has happened to lead me to where I am right now. So I sit here and I say, I'm in a perfect marriage. I have great kids. My life is great. So it's hard to be disappointed. I think so many of your life experiences lead you to where you are. But yeah, there are some situations that you wish you would have handled differently. I hurt a lot of people that I love early on, and you know, unfortunately, you can't take those things back, but you can learn from your mistakes and become a better person. And I like to believe that I've done that over the last 20 to 25 years. Obviously, the game of baseball and the notoriety and the temptations that come along with it probably cost me a couple of marriages. May have cost me, you know, the kind of relationship with my kids that I really want in the long run. But they made them. I made them, and I'm you know, standing up for them, being open and honest about them, so that, you know, maybe a high school kid or a college kid or a kid coming up through the minor leagues, you know, doesn't make the same mistakes that I did if they read this book and see what I went through.
That's a really great perspective. Chipper Jones, thank you so much for joining
My
us
pleasure.
today. Ball player, Chipper Jones, out today, April 4th. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
After a recent string of injuries and losing his starting job to Dak Prescott, Tony Romo's future in Dallas has been very much up in the air. The Cowboys have waffled about what to do with the veteran quarterback, but now Romo has taken matters into his own hands, reportedly deciding to retire from the game and pursue a career in broadcasting. Joining me now to discuss this development is SI NFL writer Jonathan Jones. Jonathan, does this news come as a surprise to you?
Yeah, it does. In a sense, obviously, look, we saw Romo play not very much last year, but he played, he threw the ball 4 times. He looked really good in that one series there at the end of the season. We thought that he could get over those injuries. He's only going to be 37 this season, so you think he still has 2-3 more years left. But look, you're expecting him to go to, let's say, a Denver or a Houston. You know he's not going to end up in Dallas. You figure that, okay, they're not going to trade for him, but they're going to figure something out. And then ultimately, of course, he decides what he decided today to retire and join a CBS or a Fox, somewhere that no doubt would want him at the end of his playing career, when we thought would have been in 2019, for example. So it's not a surprise that he's going to join an announcer's booth. It is a surprise, though, at least in my mind, that he's doing it so soon.
Right. And it is kind of surprising for Cowboys fans, I'm sure. Romo was an undrafted free agent out of Eastern Illinois in 2003. He turned down a larger signing bonus from the Denver Broncos at the time to join the Cowboys, where he became the franchise's leader in passing yards and touchdowns. What does Romo mean to the Cowboys?
Well, he should mean a lot, right? Let's go ahead and pump the brakes. If anyone's thinking he's a Hall of Famer, I don't believe that he is. That doesn't mean that he hasn't had an amazing career, but of course you need a little more postseason success. What Tony Romo means for the Cowboys is, though, he's a bridge from Troy Aikman to, they had some really down years with quarterbacks, and he was able to bridge that gap. Now, of course, they wanted an NFC title. He was not able to bring that. In fact, they haven't even been to an NFC title game in the past 21 years. That's the one thing that's really off of his resume, of course, a Super Bowl, but even a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. He's 2-4 all time in the postseason. But what he means to the Cowboys, people should not forget, those were some very down years after Troy Aikman left the Cowboys, and he was a bridge, and a very good bridge, a Pro Bowl quarterback for a number of years for those Cowboys.
Now, like you mentioned earlier, too, a trade was in the talks, and neither the Broncos nor the Texans would trade for Romo, considering those were the teams he wanted to play for, if not the Cowboys. This move kind of makes sense, but is this really the end for Romo?
So I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Look, it's because of that lack of postseason success. These guys, they all have an itch to play, right? You look at a Brett Favre. Tim Tebow couldn't sit still on a studio set long enough. He had to go out and play minor league baseball. The only one who hasn't really scratched that itch is a John Gruden. Let's not forget, he hasn't been a coach since before Barack Obama became president, and he's having to swat these NFL teams down left and right. Tony Romo is a better quarterback than half of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL. You could argue that, and it would probably be a very good argument, he's still a top 10 quarterback. Now, when one of those quarterbacks inevitably gets injured, I think a team's going to come calling to Tony Romo. They're in week 10, and he's in the announcer booth, and they're going to say, hey, Tony, I know you're still in great shape. I know you've been working out at that Marriott on Saturdays whenever you guys call a game the next day. Why don't you come to us? We're a contender. We're 8-2. We're charging towards the playoffs. It's going to be tough for him to turn down, because I think that lack of postseason success, he has to go make another run at it. It just doesn't feel like this is the end for Romo.
All right, now switching gears here, I got to say, you went to North Carolina. You were in school during the 2009 championship run. How does this run compare for you?
Yeah, I think folks can see I went to Carolina right above my head. I'll tell you what, in 2009, it was a very special time. But let's not forget, those Tar Heels did not play a competitive game in the NCAA tournament. They won every game by double digits. They were expected to win. They were the preseason number one. They continued throughout the season. You just knew, right? You had Tyler Hansbrough, the player of the year. You had Ty Lawson. And let's not forget, most people who were around 30 years older or younger had never experienced a Tar Heel loss in the title game. Well, now let's flash forward to this season. And, of course, it's coming off the Villanova game. That was the first title loss for UNC in my lifetime. And you just get humbled, and you really appreciate the journey a lot more. And then when you consider the Arkansas game to get into the Sweet 16, when you consider, of course, the Kentucky game to get into the Final Four, and then that amazing national championship marred by 44 fouls by the referees on both sides, you really do appreciate this run much more.
Yeah, and of course, this is the year that Carolina proved the ceiling is the roof. Thanks
Yes,
so much for
indeed.
your time, Jonathan.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. For all the latest sports news, stay with SI.com and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
James drove his RAV4 hybrid, unaware death was lurking.
What?
He was challenged by a team of lumberjacks.
Let's do this.
He would drive them to Hard Knocks Canyon, where he would risk broken legs, losing limbs, and slipping and dying.
Not helping.
But death would have to wait. James left with newfound knowledge, a man's gratitude, and his shirt. How far will you take the all-new RAV4 hybrid? Toyota, let's go places.